Okay. Thanks everyone for hopping on. Yeah, so as kind of the invite said, I just wanted to give a introduction on Svelte. It's kind of a newer JavaScript library, and I dabbled around with it on a side project for a couple months and was really impressed by what I was seeing. So figured I'd kind of show it to as many people as I could. And yeah, it's kind of starting to gain some popularity, but figured before we get started, I'd introduce myself to, if anyone doesn't know me, my name's Micah Wood. So some of the more interesting facts about me, I do have a cat named Cheese. She's pretty adorable. I'm also vegetarian. I've been working here for about 7 years now, primarily working in Angular the last like 4 of it. So that's a bunch of my experience now has been front end and Angular focused. I also actually enjoyed season 8. So we can talk about that later if it comes up. But what we're really here to talk about is Svelte. And so, yeah, like I said, it's kind of a newer library. It's got a bit of a different take on how it handles creating front-end components. But if you've got any experience working with something like React, Angular, or Vue, a lot of it will look very similar. So I figured here's kind of the overview of what we'll be covering. So first of all, just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what Svelte is, how it's different from some of the other frameworks that are out there, some of its pros. If we got time, it's got some cons. We can go over those. And then at the end, I'll answer any questions that you guys may have. So first of all, what is it? Like I said before, it's a front-end JavaScript library. You're probably all familiar. These come out all the time. So yeah, it's no surprise that there's yet another one added onto the pile. But there is some more interesting things about it. And so kind of to take them at their word, here's the way they described it. So they described it as a radical new approach to building user interfaces. Whereas traditional frameworks like React and Vue do the bulk of the work in the browser, Svelte shifts that work into a compile step that happens when you build your application, which, I don't know, to put it another way, have you guys heard of things like the shadow DOM or change detection through something like Zone.js? Morons. The way Svelte handles it is a little bit different. You can think of it kind of like TypeScript, where it's a compilation step. And so what that means is that you take your Svelte code and run it through some kind of machine, and then that machine is just going to spit out a whole bunch of native CSS, JavaScript, and HTML. What this means is there's no Svelte runtime code in the browser. It's just native JS handling DOM manipulation, styling, everything. So you can think of it another way as if you were to do like a bundle analyzer of a React application, you'd see that, you know, depending on the size of your React application, of course, about half of it is going to be code that's just required to get React up and running. The other half is going to be your application code, where in a Svelte application, the only thing being delivered to the library is essentially just purpose-built JavaScript. And so I had said if we got time to go over the cons, we'd get to it. I'm actually going to flip it around and start with the cons, because I figure the best way to show the pros is by actually writing some code. So to begin with, probably one of the bigger cons for me, at least, is that testing is not really a thing that they've got in place at the moment. They have said it's a high priority, and by testing, I mean specifically unit testing. So there are ways around it. Since your application does get built into a front-end thing, you can still do some kind of end-to-end testing using like Cypress, for example. A question that's come up a lot, but where they actually have a open pull request to discuss it, is scalability. So a couple of the things that people have wondered about is, since there's no static runtime, that means every component that's created has its own code for how that component runs. So React and Angular and Vue can do a lot of kind of abstraction and code sharing in that runtime. So your components that you create are all very light. Whereas Svelte, since it handles things differently, this can lead to problems of, or not really problems, but this can lead to a bundle that keeps growing and will at some point eventually become bigger than a React application would, even without that runtime. But it would take, a significant number of components to get to that point. And then there's also ways that you can kind of cut down on your bundle size by using things like code splitting, which Sapper, which is one of the server-side rendering add-ons, actually handles. So if you're at all curious about some of the other things that may pop up if you were to try and build a gigantic Svelte application, that link would be a great place to go. One of the other cons is community support. So since it's a newer application, there's going to be limited community libraries and material and documentation and blogs and everything online. But that said, it's not a terrible thing. One nice thing is because it's just vanilla JavaScript at the end of the day, you can use any JavaScript library out there and it will work pretty much just fine. But yeah, if you're wanting like a robust UI library, those can be hard to find. So you're going to be like either making your own kind of components for making use of like Bootstrap or something like that, or finding vanilla JavaScript date pickers and things like that. So next up, I wanted to go over the things that I do actually really enjoy about using Svelte. And I figured the best way to kind of show how it handles things a bit differently would be by way of some live coding. So let me do some window magic. All right, and so here I've just spun up kind of a new Svelte application. And if you guys have multiple monitors and feel like trying to follow along, the first command you'd want to run is this npx digit svelte.js/template, and then whatever you want to call your project. I'll kind of keep that around. Since I've already run it, I can just do npm run dev. And this is just whatever you want your project to be named, and it will create a folder of that. And then obviously do an npm install as well. And so let's get this up and running. And so the first thing that I wanted to talk about that I really enjoyed about Svelte is just the lack of any kind of boilerplate. So if you've been doing work with front-end frameworks for a while, you'd know that like if you did Ember or Backbone or one of the older ones, in order to get anything to display on the page, you're needing to create a lot of kind of framework-specific objects and things to get it working. Same with like the early days of React, you'd need to create your React class that extends React component, or in the ES5 days, you'd be calling a React function specifically to create your component. Similar, Vue's got its objects. Angular has its class with annotations. But with Svelte, you really do just declare variables and modify variables, and it just works. So what I mean by that is we could come in here and say we've got a count, and we'll just create kind of your classic button counting example. So say increment, and we'll have a increment function, and it just says count plus equals 1. And then on click, we'll call increment. Oh, and we should probably display the count. Well, yeah, sure, count is, that's good. Oh, I don't want to call it then. There we go. So you can see, don't have to do anything with like hooks. We didn't need to use set state. Yeah, nothing too fancy. You just have a variable, you modify the variable, and then it will create all of the code that's necessary to update the DOM without any kind of framework specific code being shipped to the browser. So like if we were to look at the bundle that's generated, you can see it's all very human readable, and all it's doing is just keeping track of the variables that we create and modifying them. And then there's some nice things about it being a compilation step versus a runtime step. So for example, if you've done much with React, you've probably heard at some point like inline functions are bad for your callbacks because it can mess with garbage collection and performance. But the Svelte compiler is smart enough to not to be able to kind of handle all of that anyway. So let's see. Yeah. Wait. So if we want, we can do an inline function. What am I doing wrong here? Oh, you disappeared and got added there for some reason. Oh, because it was trying to help me enclose the button all over again. There we go. Tooling can be a little weird. So you can see, got an inline function. And in their own documentation, they say, don't worry about doing it this way. So if you don't want to litter your script block with a whole bunch of click event handlers, essentially, you can do it this way. Let me pull up my notes to make sure I go over everything. And then if you've done anything with Vue, you're probably used to seeing components that are kind of made up this way as well. You don't need a template tag itself. You just write HTML outside of the script or style tag, and that will be your template. So let's say we want to style our p tags. So we can say that they are color of red and a font weight of bold. So now you can see this p tag has been colored, but it does have, what's the word? Scoped styles or encapsulated styles. So if we were to come in here and create another component, and we'll call it p.svelte, because all it's going to do is have its own p tag. We can go ahead and import that component. And display it at the bottom. And you can see that even though we were styling p tags in general, it's only impacting this, this component's p tags and not the global scope. But if we wanted to affect all of them, it does give you that ability with that syntax. Next up, oh yeah, so it does have kind of its own weird ways of doing things. It's all valid JavaScript, but it's going to look strange. So it's got what it calls reactive declarations. And so you can think of it as if you've ever had some kind of state in your application that needed to be derived based on changes in other variables, that's where this kind of comes in. So let's say we've got our some kind of nums array, and we just wanted to display them on the page. You can see we've got that. And then if you wanted to create a sum of the total numbers, you could do something like sum equals nums.reduce. And what is it? Total current. Something like that. There we go. And so that's great, but let's say we wanted to have the ability to add a number. Then we would want to do actually, let's do it the wrong way first. So you can see as I click this, nothing's being updated. So it does have the caveat like state in React, where you want to make sure that you're not mutating state, you're creating new state. So the quick and dirty way would be to do something like redeclare it or reassign it. That doesn't want to work either, but let's see. Let's just do it this way and see if that fixes it. Oh, there we go. So the wrong way, I couldn't even make the wrong way work, but at least it works the right way. And then you would need to do something to update this sum because our array has changed. Let's get a line break. There you go. So sum's something that we want to update automatically as the numbers are updated. So it gives you this kind of weird syntax that you can do that in line, where you would do $, colon, and then nums equals, just do the same function. Oops, sum equals. And you can see that it still works. So what it's doing is anything to the right of the equal sign, so it could be composed of multiple variables that you wanted to watch, it's going to know that it should be watching for a change in anything to the right of it and recomputing the value on the left. So for example, we can even have something that updates based off of the derived state of something else. So now we've got double and you can see that that updates as well. And what's crazy is this even supports things like if statements. So one of the weirder ones. And so as you can see, I've already created another component, so I can show you guys how to handle passing around props. And so as everything is just normal JavaScript, not really dealing with any framework-specific code at this point, if you want a prop, you can just export the variable. And so now we can pass in what we want this text to be. And if you want, you can even give it a default value. Oh, whoops, not box, P. There we go. Yeah, box was me playing around before this to make sure that it works with SVGs, which it does. So I guess you don't get to see me write the code because I know basically nothing about SVGs. One of the things I'm trying to learn. But if we come in here and bring in box, you can see that that also works. And likewise, it does have a shorthand. So say the property name and the value variable are the same. What you can do is just do content like this. Or maybe it's just content. I know my editor will do it for me. That's what's complaining. Declare your variables. There we go. Yep, so that's the shorthand. It's just curly brackets around content. What else do I want to cover? Oh, another one is, say you wanted to bring in a whole bunch of stuff. So say we wanted a color and a italics Boolean. Oops. We'll just go color. Trying to remember what the don't mess with styles too much. Going off script here. Oops, not font weight. Let's do it this way. So we could have an object. And you can just spread that object. That's probably not the right way of doing the color, but we'll do it this way, just to show that it works. So yeah, in the event that you had to pass in a whole bunch of different properties, if you've got them in an object, you can spread it, and then it'll do content equals content, color equals color. And so when it comes to template logic, if you've done anything with, yeah, if you're a big fan of JSX for its use of JavaScript in the templates, so there's nothing framework specific there, you'll be a little bit disappointed. But that said, I feel like their implementation's not too bad. So we'll have kind of another example component since the app one's getting kind of big. So let's just throw you in here. Let's get one that's a little more unique. There we go. Okay, right, templates, template logic. So do something similar. So we'll start with kind of our if blocks. So instead of needing to decorate an HTML div or something with your logic, you just do kind of this thing. So if we will say like if num, let's go back to CS days. If num mod 2 equals 0. So this is the way you would handle just kind of your ifs, nothing too crazy. You can see as I change this, that's going to update. It also supports else ifs if you want. So yeah, you've got, even though it's not exactly native JavaScript at this point, like I said, it's not a div, so it does still kind of stand out a bit more. Likewise, if you had an array, homeroom, there we go. You can do each, what is it? Array has n. So you can see we loop out of all of that. Likewise, you can get access to the index. And then it also can take a identifier. So in this case, we'll just do I as the unique ID. Isn't really necessary in this example. That's one thing you can do. But what's really cool, this is all pretty standard stuff, but let's say we've got some kind of promise. So it's been a while since I've had to create a promise myself. So let's give it a try. And give it a callback. So checked. Get a little fanfare, and in a second and a half, it should complete. So what you can do is a little something like this. It's got an await syntax for its templates, and let's quit out of Slack. So we can await our promise. So at this point, we're just waiting for it to load. So we'll do our little spinner. Oops, no. So there we go. We'll do that one more time. Give it a little bit longer, about 3 seconds. So you can see it displays loading while we're waiting for our promise to resolve. Then once it does, it automatically unpacks what that promise's value is, and then we can assign it to whatever we want. So we can call this, V. This doesn't need to be called promise. And it all just works. Likewise, let's say instead of resolving, we reject it. then you can add just another block in here, similar to the then of catch. Where we just display. So yeah, just a lot of the kind of normal promise-based logic can be handled pretty easily that way. Oh, likewise, it has support for component composition. So let's say in our example, we wanted to be able to pass in some kind of completely arbitrary HTML into this. All you have to do is make use of the slot element, which, well, it's valid HTML at this point. My editor doesn't want to do automatically. So now anything that we insert here now let's wrap you in a p tag. Now if we come in here, we can add anything in here. And you can see all of that stuff got inserted where we put that slot. And it does have support for a couple other things. Yeah, we got some time. So you can name them. So say we wanted this to be more of a contact card. So let's say we've got make it look nice. It's too bright. There we go. Now we can come in here and say we want, for whatever reason, we wanted the name to come in this case with a as an S3, so we can set Micah and just a p tag for the address. Wait, strong. Can I not call it address? Oh, whoops. You're supposed to be a name. There we go. And you can see it even grabbed the P style from where it was declared rather than being used inside of that component. And if you wanted, you can give these default values as well. Oh, and then Svelte does have support for events, so you don't have to pass callback props if you don't want. You can make use of events. So this is the first time we're going to be importing from Svelte. And so this is just going to take whatever we want to call our custom event. So we'll call it demo. And then this can include any kind of values that you want. So in this case, let's do something like that. So what this means is, just like we did on click, you would do on demo. And for now, we'll just console.log, whatever the args are. So you can see we got our custom event with a type of demo, and where are you value?
Detail status true.
Ah, thanks. My mouse was hovering right over it too. I appreciate the help. Yep, so you can see because we called it, yeah. So this doesn't need to be an object. If we wanted, we could just pass in some kind of string. And likewise, the detail is going to be whatever we passed in. So native DOM elements or native DOM events do bubble, but custom events do not. So if we needed to pass this through, so say we had some other kind of child component. What am I doing? There we go. So say we wanted all of the events to come through here, you can just do on demo as the shorthand. And so what that means is we're not doing anything with this event here. So you can just, whatever comes from that event, just basically pass it out the other side. And so if we come in here and change this from example to child, and you can hear my cat. And let's import child. we break? Oh. Oh, what's even going on there? What am I looking at? Oh, let's rename here. Yeah, the name and the app name are synced. Oh, whoops, because I've been working with example. There you go, the dangers of live coding. Oops, and screenshotted. So you can see the events being passed through like normal. It's got a couple other nice things. So say you've got a form and you wanted some kind of on submit callback. Most of the time you're probably used to needing to do like a prevent default so that it doesn't actually submit the form the way the browser wants to. You want it to run some kind of JavaScript callback function. So what Svelte provides is a lot of these kind of helpers. So what this is going to do is by default, it will prevent default. Likewise, there's stop propagation. There's some even cooler ones like once. And so what this does is this on submit hook is only going to fire the one time. And then if you were to try and submit the form again, this would have been removed and would just kind of ignore like future click events or things like that. What else would be worth going over in the last little bit of time that we've got? Oh yeah, so you probably noticed that we've been able to do all of the code that we wanted to just at the root level of this script tag. It does have, it does provide some callbacks or some lifecycle hooks. So we've got things like on mount, on destroy, before update, and after update. And so if you needed to do any kind of special logic, you can do it in here. And so what's nice is this supports async await in the compilation step. So if you needed to do some kind of response equals await fetch some URL. So you could do something like that. And it's actually recommended that you do any kind of HTTP calls from within an on mount, because Sapper, the server-side rendering portion of this, will not run any code in on mount on the server side. So if you've got to do any kind of like DOM manipulation, you don't want to have to worry about mocking out what the DOM looks like in the server, just so that it's not going to blow up the moment you try and do window dot something. Just throw that code inside of an on mount, and it will, and it'll just wait until it's on the client side to run it. Similarly, on mount does support returning some kind of function, and so whatever is thrown in here is going to whatever is returned by this function is going to be called when the component is destroyed. So you don't, if all you needed to do was clean up like some kind of timeout, you could return a callback that clears the interval, and then you're done. Or you could still just create the on destroy and keep track of it and call it that way. And then let's see. We'll go over stores and context. So if you're not familiar with context, what that does is makes it so that it's very easy to pass data from a parent to a direct descendant without needing to pass it through everything. So we've got this child component that makes use of the example component, and now you can see we're using the child. So let's say we needed to pass some kind of prop to example. So let's do that. Export, we'll do name again. So right now, name is undefined. And so, yeah, without context, what we would need to do is just pass it to the child. Child's going to ignore it. All it's going to do is pass it along to the component that actually uses it. And so since we don't want to do that, we can import, set context. And so now you can do something like set context, which takes a key, and then you give it whatever kind of value that you want. So this can be itself be made up of functions. So let's say we wanted to have some kind of alert, or just alert. And we'll also give it a name of Micah. And so set context, it takes a key. The key itself doesn't need to be a string. And so what they recommend is that you do something crazy like this. Because if you know anything about JavaScript and equality, you'll know that, like, if you accidentally use the same string, then they're going to be the same. But if you were to try and compare an object to an object, each of these is a completely different instance of an empty object, and so it's false. So you could create all of your keys just using some kind of variable name, and then setting the context there. And then if we go into here, we can import get context from Svelte. And because we're needing to pass around this object at this point, we'll have a store.js. Now we can unpack everything. And it worked. And then if we wanted to, just take my word for it, we could also, you don't need to take my word for it, tie it to a button, we'll just do it like that. So you can see, we can call anything that's in there. And going real fast, it also has stores. So let's see, input from, stores come from, is it also Svelte? Or is it something else? It's just Svelte. So heading back to our example. So now we've got this store object. So stores are used for any kind of state that changes over time. So in this case, we've got a count that just sits at 0. So what we can do is say, let's just see. So the way you get access to any of the store data is to read it. So just because we're using really terrible names, we'll just go with C equals. Where are you from? Oh, and then export. There we go. So you can see we got a value of 0. And if we were to do count.set, now we want to update it to 2, do that. Or there's a count.update, which takes a callback so that you can mutate it however you see fit. So all pretty standard stuff. But what's really nice is this subscription. If you've ever done anything with subscriptions before, you know that you've got a memory leak here because you're not unsubscribing on destroy. But if all you need to do is read a value, it gives you this shorthand of prefacing it with a $sign, and then it breaks. Oh, right, because we don't need a U. What we're actually doing is the count store itself. And so you can see it works. And what's really crazy is that it works this way as well. The update, since it takes a callback, you still need to call it that way. But what that means is you could have a button on click that just does equals 0, and then delete all of its help. So there's that. Yeah, there's also a readable store. So if you had data that you wanted to be read-only, you can make use of that. And what's really cool is all it needs to do is implement the subscribe interface that Svelte uses. And so if you're somebody who prefers to use like RxJS because of all of its pipeable operators, you can literally just drop that in. If I had time, I probably would have just shown you that because it was pretty cool, but just take my word for it. And then, yeah, there's a ton of other stuff that we didn't even get to. One, like it's got a very robust animation library. So here's a much better example of some of the stuff you can do with it. So this is all the code is doing is moving a object from one array to the other, either the to-do side or the done side. And then by making use of a few of these animation directives, it will, this in, out, and animate. It handles all of the DOM animation for you. If you delete it, it just has its own animation as well. What were the other things that it's got? Module context, which if you need to have some kind of static properties that were shared across all instances of a component, you could do that, which has kind of its own unique thing where you just do script tag, but you would do type equals module. And so here you can do stuff like let instance count equals 0. Instance count plus plus. So something like that. And so every time a new, it's not in there. Anyway. Anytime a new instance of your component is created, this would get incremented, and or if you needed to like do something to keep a bunch of components in sync, like being able to call methods between them depending on how they needed to interact, you can kind of do a lot of kind of cool one-off stuff by making use of that. And yeah, I said there would be questions. So let's go back to the slide and say questions. And yeah, thanks for listening to me ramble for the last hour. Yeah, go for it if you've got any.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If it's vanilla JavaScript at the end of the day, does it not have optimizations like React would for mutating the DOM, making that faster?
It does. So because it's just using imperative coding to update the DOM, that is faster than what a shadow DOM would do. And so all of the code that's written is dependent on what the structure of your component looks like. So it knows like, oh, here's all the places that the name property of this component was manipulated. So all I need to do is watch this variable, and if something happens, I know that it's put into this DOM node, which I've given its own auto-generated ID or some kind of selector, so that, yeah, I just know instantly that it's done. I don't have to keep in memory some idea of what the DOM currently looks like and what I think it's going to look like and do all of that diffing. So it's got, yeah, so it's optimized by default. Great question. Any others?
Cool.
Or yeah, or any follow-ups to that one if I misunderstood.
No, that makes sense. In using that though, have you ever run into any issues since it's imperative of mutating things that you realize, oh, I mutated that and I wasn't supposed to, just because of a different paradigm, I guess, of reactive programming?
Not really, because it still feels exactly the same as React. So yeah, it's still got the same kind of caveats of make sure that you're not mutating complex objects like arrays and objects. Make sure that you're creating a new reference to them so that it can work its magic. But yeah, it feels exactly the same to an Angular change detection cycle or a React.
Okay.
I'm going to forget the interview term.
Reconciliation?
Yeah, reconciliation. Thanks. Bombed that interview.
Yeah, nice. Another question: the global CSS selector, can that accept like multiple rules, or would you have to repeat that for every single rule that you type out?
Yeah, it accepts multiple rules. It can be in any part of the selector. So if you wanted to say, where am I? What's going on? There you are. So say you wanted to have, it was you, right? Yeah. So say you wanted this to only be inside of divs with a UL, and then for whatever reason, you could do global P at that point. I think it's complaining, but yeah. And I didn't get into any of this, but the tooling, aside from inline callbacks, is really nice, where it'll give you the unused CSS, or you probably saw a few times it was complaining because I wasn't declaring the variable. So yeah, tooling is really good, so that even if there's not a ton of like UI libraries. But
that's good. Last question: is there any specific syntax related to the characters that you use? Like I noticed in like your if-else tags, you'd sometimes use a hashtag, sometimes use a colon, sometimes a slash. What are these different? Like if I were just to guess, is how would I use these characters if I had never seen something like before?
Yeah. So the if sign, so the number sign means this is the start of a block that's going to have. Yeah, it's basically the start of the block. So pound if, pound each, pound await is how they're all going to work. A colon is basically saying like this is not closing that block. It's just another condition in it. So it would be yeah, that would be where you put your then, catch, else, any of those extra cases. And then the slash is kind of mimicking the HTML closing tag. So you close your each with a slash each, and you close your if with a slash if. So the pound and the slash mirror each other, and then colon is for any extra stuff that gets added in between.
That's interesting. I just wonder why they do it that way, since it seems like you could just see the keyword if or the keyword else and know, oh, it's not over, or oh, it's starting a block.
Yeah, and it's because it's within. I think it may have been aesthetic because they could have made it look however they wanted. I wonder if you can do an if inline, because inside the curly braces you can run arbitrary JavaScript. So if you wanted, you can have inline callbacks. You can.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably why it needed to be a unique identifier.
That looked a lot like Ember and how they did their thing. Does it have all that same functionality, or is it its own implementation of that?
It doesn't have all of the same. It just has the if conditionals, each, and the await. Those three. So unless that's all that Ember has, it's been like probably 6 years since I've messed with Ember, so haven't kept up to date with that one. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can it do TypeScript as well?
Oh, yeah. I did not even mention that. So it does have TypeScript support. It has Sass. Well, there's a plugin that's been developed to add things like Sass support. So you would do like style type equals SCSS, but that requires a bit more extra work. But when you generate a new application, it gives you this setup TypeScript command, and we'll just do it right now. So if we were to do node scripts setup TypeScript, done. So now we have TypeScript support. And so the way it works is, let's see if it updated our things. I think it has to do script type equals TS, or does it? We're going to just do it now. Yeah, so I think you got to do type equals TypeScript. Is it TS? I haven't messed with it yet. Oh, it did update it. It just didn't refresh on my screen. Don't save. Reopen app Svelte. Oh, lang equals TS. There we go. And it's probably similar. Lang style lang equals SCSS, if I remember. I don't remember. Don't look this one up yourself. But yeah, so now you can see any kind of. I wonder if it doesn't like it with exported. That'd be weird if it doesn't. Yeah, you can see count number array. Yeah, I don't know why that one's complaining, but now if we were to run it, it's going to do any of the type checking. Oh, I got to run npm install again. But yeah, so yes, went on a tangent, but yes, TypeScript supported and that easy to implement.
And one last question here: how popular is it? And do you think it's going up?
It's definitely gotten more popular within the last year. There's the people that are big fans are really big fans, and so it does have this nice niche of really easy to get up and running. So I would see it as kind of encroaching on Vue a bit more than Angular and React, because if I were to see it grow anywhere, just because like that, a lot of people love Vue because it scales from like very simple applications up to more complex ones with routers and state management and everything. So it fits that same niche. What I have seen it used for, which is really cool, is the fact that it's just generating kind of bespoke JavaScript for your components. People have been using it to create just one-off basically what's the word? Like native elements. So you could create your calendar picker using Svelte, package it as vanilla JS, and distribute it that way, so that anyone who wants to use it just uses it, whether they're using Svelte or not. Yep.
You can just stick it inside, say, Angular or something like that. It'll do that.
Yes.
Okay, really nice.
Yeah, in fact, yeah, I keep using the color picker because that was one that I found one that was really nice. And then when I was looking at the documentation, it was like, if you're using Svelte, you can just import it directly. Otherwise, just use the tag. And yeah, they had like 2 entry points for it, depending on how you wanted to make use of it, because yeah, they built it in the 2 bundles.
So from a STG perspective and client-wise, is this something worth learning, you think?
Nobody's hiring for it in Utah Valley. I mean, there may be some places that are using it, but I feel like similar to like Vue was pretty much word of mouth. It was a few people had heard of it, so people were trying it on some projects, and then started to use it more at clients if they had something that seemed like a good fit. I see this being the same way because it's not backed by it's not backed by like a Facebook or a Google, so it does rely on kind of word of mouth. So yeah, I'd be shocked if there's ever like a Svelte future. It could very well be that like this one dies off, but the idea of a compilation library versus a runtime library continues, and somebody makes like you could see this as being like Knockout, which started kind of the data binding, and then AngularJS popularized it. So this might even die off. It was mostly, I guess the thing that interested me the most was like, the ease of use and its different approach to how it actually ships and bundles your application. So that's probably a good time at the end of an hour and 10 minutes to be like, I may have wasted your time. Who knows if this thing's going to take off? But it works really well for if you wanted to just make standalone components, or if you wanted to, it has its own router, or I think a couple different Svelte router libraries, or you can use any of the HTML5 push state routers that exist. It works with basically any of them. So it scales well. It seems nice to use because it's, there's, you could tell, aside from like some of the weirder template syntax, most of it looks like just straight JavaScript. So real easy to get up and running. I didn't get into forms, but forms are similar. They've got a 2-way binding in place. So you do bind : value on an input, and then a change at the JavaScript level or a user interacting with the input. They're all kept in sync that way. So if you go to svelte.dev, it's got tons of examples, a really great tutorial. And so, if you're interested in more of a deep dive, I'd recommend giving that a try.
Thanks.
Yeah. If there's no other questions, then I'll let everybody enjoy the rest of their days.
Thank you, Micah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yep. Thanks.
Glad I